Okay, today I'm going to show you how to use the rolling mill for your metals project. And you can actually use this to get texture on your pieces, or you can use this for the mokume part of our soldering and bezel project. So that's a different technique in creating a texture within your metal, okay? So what I'm starting with is I'm actually going to be working with copper for my piece. You can pretty much use any metal in the rolling mill. However, nickel, because it is so hard, it's going to be really hard to get texture actually on the nickel through the rolling mill. So I'm actually using 2 pieces of copper. And my suggestion to you would be to use a thicker piece of metal so that when the actual texture goes through there, that your piece of metal is not too flimsy, okay? I'm actually using a 21 gauge piece of copper, okay? I would suggest using 20 or bigger, so 20, 19, 18, 20, or 18 for you guys, but this one is 2021, okay? So as you guys can see, I have prepared my pieces for this, and in preparing them, what I did is I actually sanded them in advance, and I went all the way up to 400 for my sanding. So I did 220 first to get out all the nicks and the scrapes on here so that they're pretty clean, and then I went the opposite direction with 320, and then I came back with 400. So I went up all the way 400. I can go back in later and clean it up after, but I want to make sure that I go with 220 and 320 first to make sure that it's clean, so that later if I have to sand and buff or polish, I'm not actually sanding out the texture that I have created. Okay, so you can see these 2 sides are the sides I'm going to be putting the texture on. These are nice and clean. These, I actually sanded the back sides as well, but then after I annealed it, you're going to have to anneal your pieces before you put them through the rolling mill to make sure that they are flexible enough and malleable enough so that the texture will actually take to your piece. So this is the texture that I'm going to be working with today. It is a piece of fabric, okay? And so both of my pieces are entirely annealed. You can see the back side I did not sand off from the fire scale after I put it in the pickle. So that's what it actually looks like. So it's nice and clean. I could sand that again. I'm not gonna do that right now. I wanted you guys to see the difference of my clean piece without sanding, and then my clean piece I sanded after with 400 as well to make sure that it's nice and clean for my texture, okay? So now I'm ready to go with your actual piece of fabric, okay? So I found some fabric at the back of the classroom. You can feel free to bring something in from home as well. Just know that you're going to be cutting apart the fabric that you guys use when you guys are working with the rolling mill, and that when you are done, you have to throw it away. So after I put this through the rolling mill, this is basically going to disintegrate, okay? Because it's being pressed in between 2 pieces of metal and then pressed even further in between 2 rollers. So this will no longer exist afterwards, okay? So as long as you're okay cutting up that fabric, you can use it for the actual rolling mill, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to take my pieces. I'm gonna lay my texture in between them, okay? Both of the clean sides are touching each other, and I'm gonna make a sandwich and line them up. And now I'm ready for my rolling mill. Okay, for a little introduction to our actual rolling mill, okay? This is the body of our rolling mill. This is our crank. If you actually take a look inside the rolling mill here, you're never gonna wanna put your fingers inside here. Right now, I've actually closed the mill, so you can see there's actually no gap in here. On top, there is an actual handle for you guys. When you guys actually turn the handle, okay, you have to turn clockwise, and it will actually open up the rolling mill, okay? Because you're gonna actually have to open the rolling mill to make sure that your pieces fit through there. Otherwise, you won't be able to crank your piece through, okay? So when I come down, I'm going counterclockwise. You can see it lessens the gap, okay, for my metal to fit through. Now on the top of the rolling mill, there are 2 different dials, okay? You always wanna keep the middle crank on the inside in there. You can turn 1 dial at a time, but what will happen is that will actually make the rolling mill slanted, which will not allow you to roll your piece through evenly. So the texture will appear on part of it, it won't appear on the other one, and it'll be extremely uneven, okay? If it ever seems uneven or it's not working, actually take this piece off, okay? And then what you can do, that would be how you would turn one and then the other. What I would actually do is crank down all the way so it's flat once again. So I can go all the way down once again and make sure that it's flat and there's no gap between here just in case it's uneven, and then put the crank back on the top, and that's how you'll get it back to make sure that it's actually even. And then use the crank to open up the actual rolling mill. And then you know that your rolling mill is even for your metal. So I'm ready to put my piece into the actual rolling mill, okay? So now when I actually put it into the rolling mill, it's a really tight fit. And then after that, I actually turned it another quarter of a turn, almost a half turn, to really make sure that it will impress that texture upon my metal. So now I really wedged it in there. It's almost stuck. I can't push it anywhere, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push. And now you can see too, as you are doing this, okay, I'm using a really big piece of metal for you guys to see. And that metal is gonna splay out at the end, okay, because it's such a big piece. So it's gonna work a lot better for you guys if you do not use such a big piece. And mine actually moved a little bit. So mine was actually a little bit too tight. I'm just gonna let it fall. Now when I take it apart, you can actually see the flour and the texture on my metal from the rolling mill, okay? And you wanna make sure that you don't have any extra fabric along the sides, because it will actually get stuck in the rolling mill when you guys are rolling it through. So that's really, really important. And as you put this through the rolling mill, what's really nice is you get that texture and that imprint on both pieces. So now I actually have two, so I could even put these together and make a bangle, okay? Now, this I just did as a demo for you guys to get some texture on here, for you guys to see how it works. So start looking at fabrics and different ideas for what you could actually put, or just patterns, what you could actually put into the metal for your pieces. And that might be something that you cut apart this metal and you include it into a piece in the future. And then you can see this is pretty flattened, where it's actually starting to fall apart in my hands, where I obviously would not use that again because it won't work for my pieces. And that is how you use the rolling mill in metals. Okay. One last thing in working with the rolling mill is you want to make sure that you clean up your area when you are done. So when I did my actual piece, okay, if you get little pieces of the actual fabric in your piece and you're brushing them off, just kind of take a dustpan and a broom and you can kind of clean up this area when you are done. Don't leave anything back here. Also, you want to make sure that you put the actual cover on the rolling mill, because what we don't want with the rolling mill is these do break pretty easy, and that's because students like to put stuff through here, tools, random stuff that will actually A, break the tool, and B, will break the rolling mill, so nobody else can use this. So if you actually look at the actual rollers on here, all of these marks are on here because somebody tried to roll something they weren't supposed to, okay? So you're only using this for your projects, you're only using this for texture on your metals or with mokume, and then when you are done with it, you want to make sure that you actually cover the roller so that nobody else A, even knows this is here, or B, uses it and tries to break it, because then they kind of ruin it for the rest of the class. But this is back here at the back of the classroom so that you can use it to add texture and kind of level up the design of your pieces.